this is the modern world. There's a song there somewhere. So welcome everyone. Ben's going to kick us off and then I'm going to jump in.
Beautiful. Okay, so hello everyone. We got 85 on this group so far. So my name is Ben Akers. I'm one of the founders of Goodfest alongside Matt Hocking and Laura Giles and Claire Wilkinson. And yeah, this is a bit different, isn't it, from sort of how we originally imagined it. When we sort of first came up with the idea of Goodfest, I think it was like 2018 that we were sort of all got together and was like, okay, let's do a festival on the beach, get everyone away from their homes, get everyone into this free creative space, feel the sand between their toes, and last 2019 we did it. Our first one, which Mark attended and blew us all away. Hence why we've invited him back this time. But yeah, this is the world we're now in. So so with the beauty of the last 18 months and us probably spending a bit too much time on Zoom, but we thought that we wanted to reconnect with you guys. We wanted to make sure that you knew that we still loved you, and we wanted to sort of make sure that we can carry on sharing these great ideas and these great worlds that we're sort of existing in, and pulling on the sort of like there was loads and loads of. I think we had like 100. I can see you, Matt. So can you give me a nod if this is right? Did we have 150 in the room? We were only meant to have 100. Is that right? So yeah. So and it was amazing because it was all about the talk between the talks. It was all about connecting people that probably wouldn't get normally connected. And that was what the idea of Goodfest was about, was to sort of create a creative space for good, for creative people to sort of know that they have this power and that they can use this power for good. So yeah, so we wanted to reconnect and we wanted to sort of say hello. And I'm gonna pass on to Mark because Mark's far more interested than me. But I just want to say some quick thank yous, obviously to the four of us. Would like to say thank Charlie Gray. She is the superstar who's kept us going all the way through. When we were just about to have it, and then this little thing called a pandemic kicked in, and she sort of had to lift herself up again. So a round of applause for Miss Charlie Gray. I can see her smiling there. Yes. And she's told me that we need to thank these amazing two people from Plymouth Uni who were the interns, but now they're not interns anymore. So Louise Fishwick and Hannah Goodman. So Louise and Hannah, thank you so much for all your great energy and work that you put in to sort of make all this happen. And they're not students anymore, so give them some work to you beautiful people out there. And obviously sort of Simon and the Leap gang, the Matt's gang back at Leap, who quite a lot of the time without this site, without the brand and without this thing wouldn't happen. So I'm going to pass over to Mark because I think Mark's going to wear the carpet out if I don't. So I just want to say thank you, and please have a fantastic day, and hopefully see you all soon with sand between our toes.
And Ben, look, mate, thank you as well, because it's a collective you've got down there, and you've all got each other's backs, and that's exactly the way these things should be. And more of that later. So welcome all of you. And there's a few things I'm going to say. I'm not going to bore you. I'm actually getting in the way of the great people that are on later. But there's just a few things. Firstly, in terms of the way this is going to work, there's a series of speakers, and then there's some breakouts. You'll be directed from one to the other, either by me or by Laura, or by the previous speaker who will kind of, shepherd you into the right space. It's really important to move. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of Qigong later. I might do some, if I run out of things to say, we might start the morning with some. We'll see how we go. It's really informal, right? Cats walking across the screen, dogs getting in the way, babies that need feeding, nakedness, we embrace all of that. Like, that's life on Zoom from the waist down. Obviously that's life on Zoom, so please don't feel that you have to turn your camera off. It's really lovely to see you. However, it's also really lovely for you to be comfortable. So if you want to turn your camera off, that's absolutely fine too. Super informal. Use the chat and the Q&A boxes to ask questions. And let's make this as discussive and discursive. My chickens are kicking off as we possibly can. Is that's all clear? And if you need a pee, you don't have to wait for a break. You can just go and come back, right? Is that okay? Amazing. That's fantastic. So I don't know how you started your day, but I started my day with a swim in the lake. I've got a lake near me. I live in the Midlands. I don't live near the sea, but I do live in the Midlands, and I've got a lake near me. And I started my day with a little 100-meter breaststroke through the lake. And halfway through, I put my back out just as I was getting to the lake this morning because I'm old and 53 and grumpy. And I put my back out throwing a stick for the dog. And I flopped onto my back in the lake, and I looked up at the sky. And I just took in this magnificent sort of vista. It's very clear last night, quite cold, beautiful sunrise. And then the plane came over because I live quite near East Midlands Airport. And then another plane came over, and then another plane. And I just thought back to the last 18 months. I've been swimming on that lake for 18 months. And the difference has been astonishing. As we've woken up again, the disruption and the noise from above has increased. Now, I'm not lecturing. I fly for work. I haven't recently, obviously, but I understand the need to do so. But it's really demonstrable, this change that we've been through, and this reset, this rethink has given lots of people space to go, actually, I don't want what I had. When you want things, you're living in the future. When you want to own things or be a thing, you're living in the future. And when you yearn for what you had in the past, the grief of what you haven't become, you're living in the past. And it's that tension between now and the past or the future that causes all of our pain. So it's really important to be here now. And I want you to be really present here today. It's a super important work. It's a celebration, not a commiseration. And I'm going to talk later about reasons to be cheerful. And, you know, this had to come from Cornwall, California, or whatever you want to call it, because change happens at the edges. And the edge of Britain is really powerful. You've got great minds there. And if you think you can't make a difference, there's a really great piece of work by the artist Chris Jordan, who's an environmental artist in the States. And he wanted to show the power of a crowd. So we started to write down the names of all the environmental projects around him in California, Sierra Club, California farmers markets. And he just started to write these names down, and he wrote them down and he wrote them down and he wrote them down beautifully because he's an artist. And before you know it, he's got a circle that is so big, it's 4 stories high. It's this huge circle of connectivity of all the environmental projects across America. And if you think you're alone, just look at that piece of artwork. Just Chris Jordan, Google it. I'll try and find it and pop it in later. Chris Jordan, just look at it. You're not alone. We're all connected. And this week has shown that for me. This week has been kind of some kind of return to normal. I've got 4 amazing events to do this week. And it started off with the incredible Creative Conscience Awards on Tuesday with Chrissy, who's on, actually, I think. And that's a celebration of these amazing students. When I say students, they're not young, they're blended, they're mixed ages. These incredible students showing us some beautiful communications work, some writing. And I've really noticed that generation, it's a confused generation, Gen Z, right? Because you've got these kind of like caring, and then they'll go to a festival and leave shit everywhere. So it's kind of like, it's a sort of split generation, but on the whole, it's a better generation, certainly than mine. I mean, I don't even know what I am, Gen X, I think, 68, whatever that is, whatever the old, right? For the old like me, this new generation care a little bit more. And I was reminded of this moment that I had about 5 years ago, when we were going to start an incubator with another project that I'm working on. We were going to start an incubator, and we put out like a series of ideas, a series of calls. Come and do some great social or environmental ideas, and we'll help you build them. We'll give you 15 grand. We'll help you get them to market. And we had like really average ideas, like genuinely average ideas. And we just thought, oh, you can't do this. You know, I can do it with no money. I can do it with no time. I can't do it with no talent. And the week after we decided to pull it, I went and did an inaugural speech at South Bank University in the design show. And so I'm there talking about the designers, right? And I'm talking about how design is the future, which it is. It's the single most powerful environmental tool that there is. Creativity, imagining a world that hasn't arrived yet, is the single most powerful tool there is. And I gave that talk, and I'm looking around the degree show and I'm thinking, this is where the talent is. The talent's here. This is unfettered, unhindered by commercial aspiration, unhindered by people saying, yeah, but you can't do that. And it was one of those moments, and I was reminded about that in the Creative Conscience Awards, number one. Number two, yesterday I ran a really interesting brand workshop for a very, very big and very, very fundamentally good company. And they were talking about sustainability and whether they should make it a main thing, right? Obviously, make it a main thing. But the really fascinating thing for me is 4 or 5 of the people in the room went, yeah, but I don't think our customers care, so I don't think we should do it. And then I didn't have to say anything. I was about to, but then the younger members of the team went, yeah, but we care, and we won't work for you unless you do, sorry. We won't work for you. Why would we work for you if you don't care? How are you going to attract the best talent in the world unless you care? And it was brilliant. It was that moment in the room where everyone went, and I just went, what she said. Like, she's the future. And I gave that analogy, and I give it all the time. As sustainability rises, as people of color rise, as women rise, there will be a reaction, because there is nothing more dangerous than a dying lion. And as the new way washes in, the old way will cling on with their claws. This is going to be amazing. This is a ride. It's going to be incredible, this change that we're seeing. And we're right at the most exciting point in history to ever be alive. And I embrace that. And I'm going to talk more about that later. Because you could look at the world and think, oh, it's not quite right. So the guys at Goodfest have recently done a survey, and they found that just 26% of creatives consider sustainability to be a priority when producing work. So I'm just going to flip that. 74% of creatives do not think sustainability is a priority when delivering creative work. How? That is utterly ridiculous. And actually that doesn't reflect the people I know in that world, right? What it does do, though, is it reflects the brief. And as creatives, as designers, your job is simple. Challenge the fucking brief. The brief is set by old thinking. You're not. Your parents' aspirations for you will be safe. Your aspirations for you should scare you witless. The brief will be safe. Our customers aren't really interested in that. Our customers aren't really interested in that. Yeah, but your employees are. Your talent, sorry, a little swearer there. Your talent really cares. I'll try not to swear anymore. But I'm angry, right? I'm angry. But I'm also really, really hopeful. 74% of creatives do not consider sustainability as a priority when delivering work. We're in a climate crisis. Climate change is the most important challenge we face. Ocean plastic, important, right? But nowhere near as important as climate change. Nowhere near, it doesn't come close. If you look at the 3 biggest challenges to the oceans, number 1, climate change, ocean acidification. Number 2, overfishing. If you give a hoot about fish, don't eat them, right? It's really simple. Number 3, ocean debris. The biggest part of ocean debris, animal agriculture runoff. So plastic isn't even the top of the category that it's in. It's really important. We need to solve it. But we've got to get our priorities straight. Climate change is the single biggest challenges. This is super, super important. But the good things that I'm seeing the rise of these terms, and we need to be careful how we use them. Sustainability, net zero, regenerative agriculture, circularity, all the words that I've used and worked in over the years, these really matter because good has become the new cool. The watch out is, as good becomes the new cool, there becomes a form of elitism. And I've already seen this. I've already seen this with B Corp. Oh yeah, we're B Corp. Yeah, we're B Corp, whereas you're not. No, we're all on the same journey. Let's help people up. Let's move people on together, because there is a power in a collective, not in being the first to get an accreditation. So with that, I'm going to hand over to the rest of the day. We've got an incredible day's series of speakers. I'm super excited. Our first speaker is Juhi Shareef. Juhi is co-founder of Project Moonshot. She recently launched the Moonshot Map, visualizing over 100 circular and regenerative projects across Aotearoa. I think I've said that right, but I might have got that wrong, in New Zealand. Another Moonshot initiative was the development, and honestly, my pronunciation fails me here. I did once go to Auckland, but it doesn't qualify me for anything. In Takarangi, an Indigenous Maori reimagining of the donor economic model in collaboration with Maori scientist Tina Boassa Dean. And it's super, super important. I'm going to get out of the way. Juhi, thank you. Welcome. I hope you're well.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mark. Hi, everyone. So kia ora koutou, ko pahar te maunga, ko Thames te awa, ko Khan te iwi, ko Juhi toko ingoa. I'm Juhi Shareef. I'm not just showing off that I can speak a bit of te reo. This is actually Māori Language Week, but actually really importantly, it's the way in New Zealand that you introduce yourself at workshops and at meetings. And it's not saying this is the company that I work for. It's basically saying this is my connection to my mountain and my river and my tribe. And so I found it a real it's been a real education living in New Zealand for the past 5 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that importance of the kind of Indigenous lens in a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen. So bear with me a sec. Right, can you guys see the screen? Yeah, great. So I'm going to talk to you today about, is sustainability enough? And what I thought would be really useful is to kind of kick off with some key concepts, and then I'll come back to the question at the end. And just to give you a little bit of background about me, so I've been working in sustainability for about 15 plus years, and worked as a consultant for brands like Stella McCartney, Marks and Spencer's, Wembley Stadium, British Film Institute, and so on. And but before that, I had my first career was in film, where I worked in New York, and I produced terrible Eurotrash music videos that, thank goodness, just remain kind of anonymous on the internet. But just to say that my roots are absolutely on the creative side, and I think that the role that you guys play is absolutely critical in sustainability, and we will talk a little bit more about that today. So to start off with, kind of this is a quote from Kate Raworth. I'll be talking a lot about donut economics today, so please forgive me if you're familiar with some of these concepts, but I think it's quite useful just to go over the basics as well, so we've got a common understanding. And Kate Raworth talks about the challenge of meeting the needs of everyone within the means of the planet. And so what do we mean by sustainable and sustainability? Well, so traditionally, people have talked about sustainability as meeting the needs of our generation as well as future needs, and that it's got these three elements, these three pillars of economic, social, and environmental, and that we have to take this balanced, responsible approach to all three. And usually, as I'm sure you're aware, the economic side, the business argument has really won out. But it's really important to remember that sustainability is not just about the environmental stuff. It is absolutely also about that social side of things. And one of the absolute kind of key things for me as a practitioner is that context is everything. So you may have seen various versions of this cartoon over the last kind of 12 to 24 months, I guess, where COVID is, of course, a massive disruptor for the planet, but it is the first. We are going to be seeing, many more such disruptions, in the coming years. And, climate change, as Mark was saying, is absolutely kind of like critical, but there's other massive issues to deal with. Can be quite overwhelming, frankly. And how resilient we are is going to be about how deeply we can collaborate. And look, I'm not going to go into the science of everything, but I'm sure you guys are obviously you're all familiar with this. But I thought this is quite a useful diagram to show you. So this is something that has been developed by Johan Rockström, who is the founder of the Stockholm Resilience Center, and Will Steffen. And if you can see the planet Earth, where it's kind of got to now. So we've got this choice, right? So you may have heard that we are in this decade of change, of action. This is absolutely the most critical decade for us, as far as I'm concerned, because this is where we make the choice. In every decision we make about, whether we buy a new car or, what we do as a business and what our clients are doing, we have the opportunity to either make a positive change or to lock in emissions for the next, however many years. And so what it's going to take to get the planet out of this kind of trough up onto a new stabilized Earth is massive focus and attention, right? If we don't do anything, we continue on this trajectory, people are talking about trying to stay within 1.5 degrees of warming. Well, at 2 degrees, we're going to lose all our, coral reefs and about 50% of our biodiversity. And then, but we're actually on track for, 3-4 degree warming, at which point there are these horrific feedback loops and the planet just gets hotter and hotter and uninhabitable for humans. Kind of awful. But, as Mark was saying, this today is about being, optimistic, and is about having a sense of agency that we can do something. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't get out of bed if I didn't think we could. We do have a chance, but we do need to be brave. And I do think that we can get to that new stabilized Earth model. So as I mentioned the donut economic model earlier, it's a really useful model for setting a context for a project, but also kind of cities are really embracing this as a new way of looking at their activities, right? So if you're familiar with this, apologies, but I'll just briefly go into kind of what this is. Some of you may have heard of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So there's these 17 goals, and the central circle, the social foundation, is all those goals that relate to society. So those are the key things we need to have a strong social foundation. The outside circles, the ecological ceiling, are the 9 planetary boundaries that we mustn't overshoot. And the idea is to stay within that safe and just space for humanity and grow that. So things like circular economy, for example, is part of growing that green space for us. Those are all the kind of hows, and this is a really good example of a kind of context. And the reason that I'm so interested in the donut is because I tried, as chair of something called the Circular Economy Accelerator in New Zealand for a couple of years. And people really didn't get circular economy, and I couldn't understand why. And I thought, well, there is no local context. When circular economy sounds like just something that, may benefit some wealthy people over in Europe, what difference does it make to a New Zealander? And I'll talk more about that in a second. But as you can see from this, you can put metrics to this, and you can see how we're doing. And this is globally. We've already overshot 4 of these environmental boundaries, the most critical of which, the hardest to come back from, is climate change. There's, of course, a social foundation. And Leeds University have got this great tool that helps you to compare different countries. So I've got like New Zealand and India here, and you can kind of, it's just interesting to see where different countries are at. But the idea of this kind of donut is not just about surviving, it's about thriving. And that's what I find really interesting. It's the questions that cities are starting to ask when they embrace the donut economic model is going, well, what does it take for us to thrive in the space? And I think from a creative perspective, it's instead of getting overwhelmed by some of these challenges that we face and these disruptions, it's really helpful to kind of flip it and go, actually, how can we thrive as a society? So another really important concept is something that Mark also touched on, is about how we're all connected, and this idea of systems thinking. It's absolutely critical for how we move forward. So in the past, particularly for business, if you look at the diagram on the left with the 3 separate bubbles, it was all about kind of returns for a shareholder and just thinking about the profit, frankly. And then we moved into this idea of shared value, I'd say about, 15 odd years, 20 odd years ago. And you'll recognize this diagram as the same one as I showed you about kind of like where sustainability sits in that nexus. And if you look at this, you can go, well, supposing your business is you're a tobacco company, right? So you might be doing really well on the environmental side, right? You've got all the certifications, ISO 14001 and international standards. You might give some money to charity or a foundation, but your core products are killing people. And this has been the model for sustainability that businesses have been using for the last, as I was saying, last couple of decades. And it has been all about incremental change. And frankly, if my client is Greta Thunberg, right? And I am a sustainability practitioner, well, I have failed, right? I've absolutely failed, because what we need is a radical system shift to improve. And so we're moving now from this idea of shared value, where business still comes first, to this idea of systems value, where you think about everything in a holistic way. So business is part of society, which is part of the environment. And so this idea of nested systems is something I'd absolutely encourage you to bear in mind as you think about everything. So think about your context, think about the systems that you're part of, so your supply chain to your customers and their supply chains and so on. And then another thing is kind of, of course, diversity is a really hot topic. And as a half Indian, half Pakistani woman, it's really important for me personally. But it's been a real education living in Aotearoa, New Zealand, because it's a bicultural country, and I've had to learn about, about Māori and Pacific Islanders and their approaches. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, when I was talking about the donut, I thought, well, look, it's a really useful model for me to bring to New Zealand. And perhaps because I am Indian Pakistani, I have a certain sensitivity to the fact that, okay, maybe, New Zealanders don't want another model imposed on them by Europe, to say, like, this is the right way to do things, the Great White Hope. So I thought, well, how can I bring this model into New Zealand in a way that will be relevant for them and useful for them? And so I thought, well, actually, I need to partner with a Māori scholar. So I partnered, as Mark mentioned, with Tena Boasa-Dean, who's a soil scientist, to translate the donut into te reo. And the benefit of that, I mean, for me, it's immediately obvious, because if you look at the kind of the maroonish circle, instead of saying a planetary boundary or ecological ceiling, it translates as hatua matangi, which means our last breath. And that's so evocative, right? It's the planet's last breath. And Tena said to me, look, Juhi, this is fine. We've translated this, but this does not represent the Māori worldview. And I couldn't understand what she meant. And she said, well, look, for Māori, the land is our ancestry. So we need to have the environment as our foundation, not society. And I went, okay. I was a bit confronted about this because it didn't match Kate Raworth's version, but I said, look, I have to make space for this Māori leadership, because it's their worldview. So she flipped it and put the Ecological Foundation at the center, and then worked with a designer of Pacific Island descent. So we had real kind of integrity in the production of this as well. It wasn't just we had a kind of a white designer working on it. We kind of had a really good mix of people involved. And Tena worked for hours, had discussions with different kind of Māori wayfinders to come up with this diagram. And you might go, okay, well, this is a great kind of ethnic looking diagram, you've got some triangles here and everything. But what I learned in those like hours and hours of discussions was that every single design element has meaning for a Māori person. So the triangles are triangles that you will find on a whare. This is a Māori kind of meeting house. The gray and white spiral is to show that the donut is not a static thing. It is actually a takarangi, a spiral that is a dynamic element. So you're not just sitting steady, right? So the donut shows kind of what you have done in the past, where for Māori, they're saying, actually, where are we going in the future? So there is that dynamic element. The double spiral of the gray and white spiral shows Rangi and Papa, the Earth Mother and the Sky Father working together. So every single design element means something. And that for me was a real education. So I found that the whole process of working with Māori at the table, not, I've had lots of meetings where, we want to help young people or elderly or this culture or that culture where they are not at the table. And I think it's really, really important as we move forward from a creativity perspective to actually have those people there co-creating with us. And just to say that, when we launched this in the Moonshot City podcast, it went viral as much as a sustainability thing can go viral. In that for us, it was really great to see it was shared by Indigenous people all over the world. And the UN and so on. And there was a series of essays in the national paper there in the Herald called, Why I'm Afraid. And it was all of the things that were going wrong with New Zealand, which are, and there's a lot, social inequity and environmental damage and so on. And then this was shown as a reason for hope. And so I guess what I want to say is that there is such power in one image that I'd really kind of, it's just something I thought it'd be interesting to reflect on. And then moving on really quickly, we talk a lot about purpose-driven businesses, and many of you may be working for businesses with a purpose and good principles and values, but quite often they end up just as a cat poster, right? Like just something on the wall. And back to Mark's point earlier, I think it's really, really important to challenge clients because I think in terms of your roles in the creative industries, you're absolutely at a you have a critical role because you guys can inspire, you can make things beautiful, you can cut through all of the noise. And you can challenge. And I think that is absolutely your responsibility to do that as well. And I think it's really easy to say because when, you get a client who's just like, here, we need this job done and you want to exceed their expectations, but actually go, well, hang on, your values are saying this and your product is doing this, right? If we continue with this, it'll be greenwashing, right? So to really kind of get in there and challenge. And, I've talked a lot about the donut, but there are some useful principles that sit behind this that, if you just kind of look this up on the internet, the principles that sit behind the donut can be really useful when working on your own projects. So I'd absolutely encourage you to have a dig and do a bit of research into them if you haven't come across them before. And then finally, there's a lot of different tools and frameworks, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed, right? You might hear about the UN SDGs and biomimicry, like how can we, mimic nature and cradle to cradle and circular economy and it's very easy to get overwhelmed by this. And as a practitioner, I have to say I get absolute framework fatigue. So something I have found useful, I don't know if you've come across this, is the Future Fit Business Benchmark. And even if you're a small business or you're working with clients, it's something really helpful to recommend, which is there's 23 goals which show a business how to become sustainable that are all based in science, that take this systems thinking that I was talking about as an approach. So and it's all free. I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. I've noticed I've got 2 number 5s, but never mind. And so to finish off, really for me, sustainability is about doing less bad. So it's about how do you reduce your waste? How do you reduce your emissions? How do you get to net zero? It's not particularly inspiring for me, to be honest with you. And is it enough? No, I'd say it's not, because we've been talking about sustainability for a couple of decades, and we haven't made the changes that we need to make. So for me, it's about, well, how can we not just do less bad, but how can we do more good? And this kind of slightly crazy diagram, I think, illustrates it quite well. So if you look at the bottom, from this idea of conventional practice, and this is business as usual, and this is what pretty much a lot of businesses and kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And then you start getting greener. So you start talking about some improvements here and there, some initiatives, and then the midpoint is really where you get to in terms of being sustainable. So where you're not doing any more damage, but you are not, at that point, you haven't still started restoring the planet, right? And for me, that is the most exciting space, is actually going beyond sustainability to becoming restorative and ultimately regenerative. And I absolutely urge you that when you start looking into what regenerative means, to not overuse this word, right? It's so easy for these things to become buzzwords and absolutely overused and meaningless, honestly. But regenerative for me is the gold standard. It's when you have the systems thinking, when you have got radical collaboration, that you are thinking about, the environment and society, and how you can improve those, not just do less bad. So again, that Future Fit Business benchmark has a methodology to go from sustainable to regenerative. So do check that out. But then to go right back to my question at the beginning, is sustainability enough? I don't think so. I think that we really need to go beyond that. And I'd urge you to just kind of keep that in mind during the day. Doesn't matter what you call it, but kind of let's go further. So thank you.